happens. Hey, Keith and Anna, and there's Jesse. Okay. So, hey, Jesse, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, there's no co-host option on the account.
Oh no. That's okay.
So
Because
let's
I'm
just,
myself. Yeah.
right. So we'll just mute everybody and we'll just tell me when to, I'll direct the slides, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Sound good? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hey, Melissa and Rachel and Anna and Keith. How's everyone doing? Feel free to talk in the chat box. I'm gonna mute everyone as we come in. Alicia is coming in. Alicia, we do not have a co-hosting option.
Okay. No problem. No problem.
So just want to let you know. So surprise.
Well, you can still, unmute me and Jesse.
Totally. I think it'll be great. Totally. Okay. So let's so Melissa, hey, where is everyone from? Feel free to tell us in the chat box as everyone comes in. I know there's plenty of people from all over, I think, the world from when I was sending out the email today. So there are a couple of people from Europe, from Australia, I think, that at least we'll get a recording. Richmond, Virginia.
Hey.
Thanks for being a part of Hartford, Connecticut. Awesome.
Oh.
St. Louis.
Yes.
So awesome. So great. So glad everyone's here. So the way we're going to do this is feel free. So as we go through, you're more than welcome to put comments in the chat box. Okay. And also, why don't you guys, before I start into the nitty gritty, can you all tell us what your background is? Or are you a yoga teacher? Are you a therapist? Are you in the wellness professional category? Whatever, otherwise undefined, So tell us what that means. So feel free to tell us what that might mean. So hold on one second. I'm getting a couple of messages. So go ahead and chat while we wait for people to chime in here. I'm getting a couple of messages on Instagram here. Hold on. Okay, cool. I signed up for 1 o'clock workshop, but not know where I'm joining from. Okay, I'll be right back. I'm going to, well, people are, can you see the chat box, Alicia and
Yes.
Jesse? Can you guys just respond to those while I send this out?
Sure.
Okay, and then we're gonna start in like 2 minutes.
Oh, this is so great.
Yeah, I love you guys are here.
Yes.
Okay, let me.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
We have lots of yoga teachers.
Well, we have one. So Rachel is in teacher training right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have a couple social workers.
Mm-hmm.
LCSW therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see who else is on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, Fiona and Stephanie. I don't think we've heard from them yet.
And yeah, you don't have to say anything. This is just more if you feel like you want to chat, be social. Sure.
Just a way to connect.
Oh, okay, super. Cool.
Ooh, Austin, Texas. Fun.
Austin, Texas, LPC. Okay, great. Our the last one we did in the winter when there was like a snow day was like there was like a therapist there, a couple, and so she said all this was new information. So we love when there's cross collaboration. Stephanie says, I'm a full-time yoga teacher who's taught in a while due to full-time school job. I'm also currently a first year in an MSW program planning to become a licensed social worker. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. Jesse's starting school in fall to become a LPC. So awesome. Yes. And then I work with a lot of social workers. I work in the school system as a social emotional inclusion specialist and also a special educator, but It's like, I always say the difference between the two, like, what's the difference between social, you know, like between teaching, being a social emotional inclusion teacher and like a therapist. And like, well, therapists are like we're doing visual, you know, we're doing processing, which I'll go into more of this in the yoga piece, but then like what we do is like an educational process. So we're teaching people the language of emotions, right? So that's the difference. It's like awareness versus like emotional processing in the body. So anyway, just a little different variation when people start talking about my job. So awesome. Okay, so I think we're good to go. So I'm gonna go to share screen. So I won't be able to see you all, but I'll see the chat box. So chat away, and we will get, so feel free to put your questions in as you go. So we'll kind of be Alicia and Jesse as I talk. Maybe we can tag team on the questions and Q&A that, you know, sure. And then at the very end, we will get to we'll answer the questions. So feel free to ask as they come up. So, and we'll go through the chat box after we all talk, okay? So feel free to go with that. So, okay. Okay, of 0, hold on a second, clear. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. Here, you can take my watch, okay? Okay, yes, for now. Okay, so we're gonna share a screen. Hold on a second, guys. I gotta go down here. I gotta go find yoga. Okay, gotta go press play. 1 second. Okay, sure. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay, sweetie. Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks. Okay, here we go. Let's go to play. Go to. Hold on a second. File. Hold on, y'all, my computer. Oh, there we go. Present. Okay. All right, now let me see if this will go to exit full screen. Hold on, excuse me, guys.
We got a couple other people joining, so
okay,
we're
perfect.
just about to start. Lauren, Jessica, Adria, if you'd like to share in the chat box where you're from or what your background is, we'd love to get to know you a little bit before we start.
Okay. Oh, I see why they want to. Okay, I see. Okay, I see now. All right. What's going on? Okay, I have to share my internet screen. I'm so used to sharing from PowerPoint.
It's shared now, so you should be able to click present.
Yeah, I am. Just have to get to over there. I just got to decrease people. All right, there we are. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Yoga to Support Psychotherapy and Other Wellness Practices, an info session on the latest research around trauma-sensitive yoga, compassion-focused practices, and yoga teacher ethics, and the way that we practice, and specifically the studio that we practice in St. Louis and for our online platform through Joy of Yoga. So I'm Julie Johnson. I am one of the yoga teachers, trauma-sensitive yoga teachers at Joy of Yoga. I specialize in yin, kind of a more yin and contemplative practices, but I teach Vinyan and I teach how to breathe. And I will go through more of those later, but I kind of specialize in more contemplative and stillness practices as well. So we'll talk more about that later. You can learn all about us here later on, but pretty much the vantage point of our approach to trauma-sensitive yoga at Joy of Yoga kind of beckons from the Pema Chodron, I guess, view on things, which is you are the sky, everything else is just weather, right? So yoga is a place for us to become aware of the weather and giving us some skills to be able to cope through a yoga, through like an asana practice, right? So, and it's also a reminder that we are the sky, right? So I think there's this quote actually from Pema herself, from her new book that I'm going to read. It's really great. It's about on this note. So this is just like the updated version, but I think this says a lot about what our vantage point of trauma sensitive yoga is from like a trauma sensitive perspective angle is, with a little bit of a Buddhist spiritual slant. This is from her book, Welcoming the Unwelcome. Is this feeling permanent? Is it transient? Is it solid? Is it fluid? Is it fixed? Is it dynamic? Is it finite or infinite? You can also ask, is this feeling me? Is it not me? Is it an obstacle? Is it a portal? Or can you touch the feeling completely free of storyline and say, when experienced directly, this very feeling is basic goodness, or basic goodness is found right in here. In other words, you don't have to wait until the feeling is gone to find basic goodness. It's really soothing. Oh, sorry. And then in other words, you don't have, yep. So that is our kind of approach to trauma sensitive yoga and the way we approach it. It's kind of a way of being able to go inward and see ourselves through all the layers, but realizing that we're vast like the sky, and it's that reminder that no matter what we're feeling, there's still an essence of good and nurturance to it. So that's like the baseline of kind of our philosophy behind the why we do what we're doing and the lenses in which we teach our classes. So more about me. So I am, again, like I said, I'm Julie Johnson. I am co-founder of Integrate Network. I'm a special education teacher. I'm a social emotional inclusion specialist. I have 20 hours of in-person training on restorative practices for educators by the International Institute of Restorative Practices. So they teach like restorative practices for like circle trainings, restorative circles for people that have like been suspended or have done quite a bit of time maybe in school suspension or out of school suspension. These are kind of techniques you teach to help to kind of reestablish relationship or teach relationship building skills within the educational curriculum. So I'm certified through their 20-hour program for restorative practices. And then I'm also the coordinator of the Social Emotional Inclusions Program for Special School District of St. Louis County, which also includes trauma sensitive yoga within that program. That's one of our outreach tools. And then I'm also trained in 70 hours of trauma sensitive yoga by Zabi Yamasaki and the Trauma Embodiment Center. And I also have another 34 hours of training for trauma sensitive yoga for kids through Yoga Ed and Street Yoga, which is now called Rebel Breath. And then I also am a registered yoga teacher trained at Joy of Yoga, so through Yoga Alliance. So let me see here. Let me go to participants really quickly. Alicia, I'm gonna unmute you for a second so you can share your stuff, okay? Okay, go for it. Let me see if it'll unmute. Go.
So
Okay.
my name's Alicia Delaney. I'm also a teacher at Joy of Yoga in St. Louis and really specialize in gentle, slow, restorative practices. So that's why I'm branded under Slow and Steady Yoga. I also enjoy teaching things that are more slow, somatic-based bodywork practices like Reiki and Yoga Nidra. So, and then when I'm not teaching yoga, I'm teaching English to immigrants and refugees. So that's my background. And Jessie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Here, I got it. Okay,
I got it.
You got it. Cool. Yay.
I'm Jessie Kissinger, and I'm a teacher at Joy of Yoga. I teach meditation, and I also teach something called meditation in motion, which is a very embodied practice, a lot of focus on breath awareness. And I also have done a 40-hour training at the Trauma Center with Jen Turner and David Emerson. And as mentioned before, I will be going to school in the fall to become a licensed practicing counselor.
Cool. All right, moving forward. So here's our agenda today, which we sent out to you all. So I don't think this is any new thing for us. So we aren't going to spend a whole lot of time here, but here's what we're doing if you need a reminder. Oh, you will also all be getting emailed slides of these. So if that was a question already, we will be sending the slides out. So, okay, so the trauma sensitive yoga class guiding principles that we offer. So obviously I was saying this earlier. So well, we are not therapists currently. One of us will be, but we are here to support you in developing your mind-body awareness as yoga teachers and practitioners. If you're in need of further mental health support, please let us know how we can refer you to an appropriate therapist or wellness professional. And again, this is important because that's just knowing your scope of practice, right? So lots of times when we start getting into mental health and stuff like that, we can really, it's just good to know where you end and others begin, right? Especially with yoga. So just it kind of is yoking together of so many things. When you start to yoke together, because that's exactly what yoga means, is the yoking together, things can get a little murky. So, so that's why we really specified that we believe as yoga teachers that we are teaching the mind-body experience, right? And we are teaching about awareness of sensations in the body, and bringing awareness to compassion, and maybe even laying language down for how to describe sensation in the body through an asana practice. Okay, so we can help teach language, help model language, help teach proprioception awareness, interoception awareness, and mindfulness, right? So that's where we are, and of course, rest and relaxation, with restorative yoga. But after the awareness process, it kind of gets a little murky. It's are we processing trauma? No, we are not processing trauma. We are bringing awareness to sensations in the body, then where we hold emotion, and how we can bring awareness to the body with the emotion, right? So we'll go into more of that later, but and of course, that mind-body connection. We also support bringing compassion awareness to the experiences of the body and mind. So, of course, we look at trauma-sensitive mindfulness, trauma-sensitive meditation as having bringing a sense of compassion to our thought process. So instead of being oh, that's a bad thought, or that thought's bad, or I'm having I did that meditation wrong. I did this yoga I did this yoga pose wrong. Kind of learning to watch those thoughts and kind of bring a sense of compassion through that in the practices that we offer and the way that we do our classes. And then we also serve as empathic witness to the yoga space and a student's own experiences. So many times in typical yoga, class, that when we aren't online, which we'll talk about that in the next slide, we believe that, we are here kind of offering or witnesses to each individual person's experiences. So we're not telling them what to do. We're just facilitating a space for people to hopefully maybe go into their bodies, as much as they feel safe to in an asana practice, right? So we're not the experts on people's bodies. We're not the expert on your body, but we want to encourage you to bring awareness to an empowerment to being the expert on your own body. Okay? So sometimes yoga is the first space that people can experience that, from what Bessel van der Kolk has said, in his research. So, and then the body keeps the score. So we also facilitate opportunities for students to move their bodies in empowering ways with a spirit of non-judgment and self-compassion. So, it's not uncommon for me to look out in my yoga classes and see people doing their own thing. Okay, that's cool, and we want that sense of safety and non-performance. I don't want to look out in my yoga class, and I would like people to feel safe enough. It's my intention that they feel like they can explore what they need to explore. One of my teachers who's online, who's one of my virtual teachers, Hala Curry, she always says, the most advanced yoga students are the ones that do what their body needs, that listens to their body. And, I tell my students that a lot. And I think, if I could say it every class, I try to say it every class. I know I don't, but it's true. It's the most advanced students are the ones who do what their body needs to do, and so I cannot stress that enough. I've had a student who meditated and sat in Shavasana this is before we were practicing social distancing. She sat in there, I think for the whole series, for the whole 5 weeks. She just would come and do Shavasana for 5 weeks. And I was like, great, I'm more power to you. Okay. Thank you for feeling safe enough to come into my class and be in Shavasana for 90 minutes. You love it. So guiding principles for online. So now that we're online, we were like, how do we take those principles that we did in person? And now, because Joy of Yoga has created this online platform, we're like, we really need to adapt these principles to this online platform that we're teaching on, you know, day in and day out here in virtual, you know, trauma sensitive yoga land. So here's what we've come up with, and here's what you would get in me, Jesse, and Alicia's classes as well. And so students are invited to try a variety of yoga shapes to try on that may meet their body's needs. Like exploration and curiosity are always encouraged. I think I say curiosity at least 5 times a class, so much. So students are free to stop the virtual practice at any point in time and come back to the practice by accessing the recording. You know, yeah, I mean, and I can't stress that enough. If you feel like you're in a space where you're not feeling, you know, it's just not adequate for you at the moment, you know, that's the cool part about recordings is you can come back later, right? You have that option. This is where we can use the tool of technology to our advantage. As much as possible, students are greeted before class by the teacher to assess needs and preferences, or may reach out to students prior to class to assess needs. Yeah, I try to tell my students, this is just a me practice. This is just a Julie thing. I'm not saying this is what everybody does. This is just like the teacher and me. But yeah, I try to reach out and like create communication with my students before class via email, tell them what we're doing, go through the sequence because I'm a nerd and I'm a teacher and I tell people like, you know, not everybody does that. That's just a Julie thing. But, you know, I try to develop that and just ask prior to the class if there is a need. So at least establishing a space for communication is one thing we're really passionate about. And then as much as possible, teachers supply musical options for students to play for background music as an anchor. Now I said this, I think in my breath classes in the yin portions that I teach, I am always saying use that music as an anchor, especially if the exploration of breathing can feel activating. I think that's just really important, especially if someone's really, really new and does have some, and is, you know, if there is known PTSD, you know, in their awareness or consciousness, you know, I think that's always, I wish I knew that when I started doing meditation and stuff like that. I wish someone had told me that. I would have been great with that. So I just think that's a really powerful practice. And then especially with the breath awareness, because breathing and hearing yourself breathe can be really activating. So I think just having that music in the background is just so, can just be such a powerful anchor. And it can also teach you how to hold dual sensory awareness. So that's really powerful too. And then of course, offering options for feedback and questions after an online class is also welcomed. And then students are also able to mute themselves and disable their cameras to feel more privacy during the class too. That's one advantage to Zoom, is that we can be with ourselves a little bit more while we are in this virtual space, right? So sometimes we can have more of that introspective experience that we want as well, and kind of being with ourselves while also, I guess, energetically being with others in the same practice when we're live together. So that's one aspect to using the technology through a trauma sensitive lens. And then students are given suggestions for shapes to take. So if technical difficulties arise, you know, students can obviously, like, this is what happened on Wednesday night, is, you know, there were some technical difficulties, and, you know, the people that were online with me did a great job when my audio went out doing what they needed to do. And I was like, great. Like, I looked up there and I was like, great, they're all doing what they need to do. Absolutely. This is a really powerful way when technology fails us, which it will, to practice being your own teacher. What do I know? What does my body need? And someone's there not guiding me. So now I'm with myself. Here's yoga. Here's yoga in action. So we're like, this is a great trauma sensitive yoga practice tool. So, you know, so that's kind of one way we've adapted those principles. The yoga teacher and body yoga. So our role in our classes is as such. So we say the yoga teacher acknowledges that his or her role is the facilitator, not the expert. That's you. We refrain from offering hands-on assist during yoga classes when we're in person. And obviously we have no contact with people. So so that's just not something we do. So the end. And then practices the 3 of us do that. I can't speak for all of Joy of Yoga, but that's the trauma sensitive classes that we offer here. Do not have any hands-on assistance when we're practicing, when we're in person. So, and not practicing social distancing. So practices with students on their own mat, and we refrain from walking around the room. We give several opportunities for students to notice sensations in the body in an empowering way. So that would mean, so obviously just being curious about what's in your body. If you can't find it, it's okay. There's no shame in not being able to find a sensation. Okay. In fact, like sometimes numbness is or feeling nothing is something, as I've said in several places. And then we always turn judgment into curiosity. So instead of saying, oh, I did that wrong, I went, I wonder what shape that was. What did my body really want to do there? If I felt like it did something wrong, what did it want to do? So if we ever start to go into the inner critic, I'm doing it wrong, or I'm sensing myself, feeling like that inner critic is, I'm not doing yoga right, because there's no right or wrong way to, there's no right or wrong way to do yoga, right? So it's kind of would be like, hey, what would that mean my body does need right now? What is my need right now? So when we start to really hear that inner critic, that can be a nice way of learning to go into curiosity more. Inquiry, really, using yoga as a space for inquiry. Refrains from using prescriptive language. So you will, very rarely do you hear me say, breathing will regulate you. Breathing does regulate you. I say it can. I say it, I say that, breath awareness, research suggests, this, but we are not doctors, and so we can't say that. Mudras might help focus you, maybe not, so I think that having that lens of, we don't know, but this could help you, it's a tool in your toolbox, right? We won't always be there, it may not work all the time, but we're not doctors, but we're here for you to have curiosity. So when you use prescriptive language, it strips people of their curiosity, okay? So when we say it might do that, we hope it plants seeds of curiosity, okay? So it can, that language is a curious language. All right, adverse childhood experiences. So, okay, so this is one thing I'm really passionate about in my work in social emotional inclusion, is talking about ACEs. And I think you cannot talk about trauma sensitive yoga without talking about ACEs. So ACEs are adverse childhood experiences and those are potentially traumatic events that occur between ages 0 and 17. And that can be anything from experiencing violence, abuse, divorce, witnessing violence in a home or community, having a family member attempt or die by suicide, mental illness, addiction. Those are just, a few. ACEs Connection is a website that I think I put on the post this morning on Instagram and Facebook that you can look into for more specifics about ACEs. But the studies show, and the CDC did a whole study on this, that when we have this much disruption ongoing to our nervous systems in early childhood, it can create chronic illness and as we get into adulthood. So the research suggests that when there is abuse and when there is ongoing instances and one stacked on top of another, that our long-term health outcomes are impacted. So that can mean that, as adults, if we have, if we've been divorced, and we've had, I think every ACE, I think if you have 4 more ACEs, it increases your likelihood of having, having some sort of health, negative health outcome by I forgot what the percentage is. I don't want to misquote myself, but it greatly increases. Okay. So if you have divorce, violence, and you live in a violent community, and there's addiction, the likelihood of you having some negative health outcome as an adult is very likely, so what does this have to do with yoga? A lot. That's down the road. That's the healing process. This is the hopeful part. This is kind of more of the part, but we'll get to the hopeful piece. So how does that impact the brain, right? So when all these ACEs are happening, here's what's happening in our brain. Our brain is, we develop kind of a reptilian brain when our bodies are constantly in this fight, flight, freeze, right? Something's going on around us. We have, I guess, like, what's his name? Somatic experiencing. Oh my goodness. My brain is fried. But the guy who wrote, who's the author of Somatic Experience and all that stuff. My brain is shot on that one. Someone say his name, but I'll remember it later. Anyway, him, he, hold on a second, I just went backwards. Where are my slides? Sorry, guys. I need to go back. There we go. Okay, the reptilian brain. So, he says, when you're living with a tiger, in your house, day in and day out, that your brain starts to be in survival mode, constantly. And so that can mean that you start to become hardwired in a survival response. So you're going to be living, you're not going to be able to maybe make like, higher order, what's the word I'm looking for? Decisions. So that means that, we might be living in a limbic system in a state of fight, flight, freeze, and that would be our lifestyle. So if in my world, in the Ferguson, Florissant, and underserved populations, we see students, that are constantly making reactive, impulsive choices. So, and that's lots of times because they have an ACE score of 10, or higher, and that can impact, how their development. So they're in survival, and then, their whole life. So that's kind of how the ACEs impact brain development. And they're not able to do the schoolwork, or they're not able to access the neocortex, which is what we need to be logical, to have imagination and plan and have impulse control, right? So that's the developmental trauma. So that's this triangle on the left here. And then over here, this is on the right, and on the left here is the typical development. This is kind of what we expect people to have, all right? And I think that there's a disconnect here in yoga. So in yoga, sometimes I think in the past, like anywhere else, we expect people to be here in this typical development point unless otherwise noted. But the science suggests that ACEs are really 1 in 4 people have an ACE. That more of us are here, and I think even more now that we're now in a pandemic, more of us are over here on the right. So more of us are going to be living in this limbic system, right? I think most of us here in our society are probably, are probably somewhere in survival. Some of us might be in regulation, but here's the disconnect. This is why trauma-sensitive yoga right now is really important, because we have a whole lot of trauma survivors right now, y'all. So I think many of us are. Depending on how, if we to take that into our own, those words into our own reality. But this right here, I think, is pretty close to our reality right now. And I think many of us might be somewhere on here, but I think this is certainly the way that many of us have had to learn to be in the world. So anyway, so this is kind of the disconnect. So what are our needs, right? So when we look through developmental trauma, our emotional needs change. So that means sometimes how we look at yoga changes too. So anyway, so when it comes to matter of survival, the lower brain overrides the conscious parts of the brain, causing the humans to react in for survival responses, which is fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So anyway, so that's essentially the freeze responses, and that's what's happening in the brain when we are either in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We're usually running at, kind of existing out of this reptilian limbic system experience. So moving on, Alicia.
So Jesse's going to start this part, and then I'll hop on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So the window of tolerance, Dr. Dan Siegel, a psychiatrist at UCLA, first coined the term. and to describe a state of the nervous system in which the brain and the body are able to think and feel most effectively. So our nervous system is constantly moving between more active and restive states, depending on the information that we receive through the senses. And within a certain range of these fluctuations, we can stay calm and connected. Maybe we get excited for a minute, but we can easily come back to center. But sometimes, events in our life take us out of the window of tolerance. And that's when our fight, flight, or freeze response starts to kick in. So everybody has a different window of tolerance. Some are wider, some are narrower, depending on the person and the circumstances. And as Julie talked about, some of us now during the pandemic may be feeling that window of tolerance start to narrow some. We all go outside of our window of tolerance at times, and sometimes these states are skillful because they help us survive. They give us energy to run away from a predator or help us conserve energy in moments of powerlessness. But when someone has experienced trauma, adversity, chronic stress, or attachment disruptions, they may find that their body is more likely to go into these modes of survival or have a narrower window of tolerance. It's easier to get thrown off balance and tip into hyper or hypoarousal. And in those spaces, it's harder to think and manage emotions. So Julie, if you'll change the slide. So in hyperarousal, that's when the sympathetic nervous system starts to kick in, and that triggers the fight or flight response. And the amygdala, the area of the brain that's responsible for warning us of impending danger, starts to activate, and the body gets flooded with stress hormones. You might start to feel anxiety, fear, racing thoughts, general sense of overwhelm, irritability, and physical movements may be quicker, and it's a little bit harder to slow down. On the other end of the spectrum is hypoarousal, and that's when this parasympathetic nervous system starts to kick in, and that's responsible for the body's rest and digest, but it can also, in more extreme cases, move into a freeze response in which the heart starts to slow down. And as we get more into this more restive state, feelings or emotions of numbness, emptiness, getting zoned out, feeling disconnected from the body, depression, these are all associated with that state. But something to think about is that, in all of these states, inside or outside of the window of tolerance, our nervous system is just taking in information and trying to figure out how best to use the energy that we have to support our survival. And so if you imagine yourself within the window of tolerance, you go up a little bit, you go down a little bit, but it's a smoother transition within your body system. When you start to get launched into hyper or hypoaroused states, it can be harder to settle back to center. So the movement between activated and restive states can look a bit more jagged. And fight or flight, basically fight or flight, it takes a lot of energy. And so the system may compensate by then dropping into a hypoarousal state to recover. So we find ourselves when we find ourselves in chronic stress, we spend less time in our window of tolerance, that space where it's easy to think clearly and regulate emotions. And so Alicia's going to talk to you a bit about how mindfulness can help people understand what's going on in their bodies and start to regulate some of those emotions.
Is that next slide?
Yeah, we'll move on to the next slide.
Okay.
I just wanted to show these illustrations. Julie, if you'll move forward once. These illustrations can be a really helpful way to conceptualize what the window of tolerance looks like. So you could even imagine the window of tolerance like this beach scene. It's pretty calm, there's an ebb and flow, but you're not necessarily, even if things are a little hard, even if things are a little distracting or difficult, you can still work through and manage those emotions pretty regularly. But if you're in a hyper aroused state, that might be like explosive anger or acting out, misbehaving, just pushing the rules, pushing the boundaries because you feel as though you have none. There are no rules that are, regulating you. You feel like you have no boundaries that are appropriately cradling you, holding you. And Jessie also shared a sweet little cartoon video that can be another helpful way to imagine and illustrate this point. Hypoarousal would be like that freeze state, non-moving or not participating, not engaged, sleepy all the time. So this is one illustration. There's another on the next slide that I'll show in a moment that just has a storm cloud, a snow cloud, and a rainbow sort of bridging the two of them. So, especially now when so many of us are so tethered to a survival state, we feel like if we even step outside of our homes, that we are in immediate danger or immediate threat. Holding that threat response so high for so long will shrink our window of tolerance. So Jessie and Julie both alluded to this, but if you are finding yourself more irritable at a time like this, it doesn't mean you suddenly have an anger problem. It means that your window of tolerance has shrunk and you're having a much harder time logically thinking, assessing the situation calmly, and instead you're just feeling and wanting to get those feelings out. And there's no shame in that, especially if you're feeling like we're in a real life or death situation. So when we think about the window of tolerance, and we know that so many people have ACEs, we know so many people have trauma histories, all of these people are coming into yoga. There are some people who will come into a class and already be regulated and feel pretty good that day. There are some folks who won't be. And so if we can bring language and imaging to these ideas and these concepts, I think it can really help not only practitioners, attend a class and realize for themselves where they are, but also for therapists, social workers, counselors. How can they appropriately recommend a yoga class and a yoga environment that will be safe for the students or for their clients to attend? So yoga can, as Julie said, it's not prescriptive, but yoga absolutely can support people in becoming more aware of these sensations, giving the language to them about how they're feeling, and not necessarily to work through them and process them in that space. They may come to a yoga class, feel all of these things, note them, name them, and then move on to process them with a therapist. But breath work, mindfulness, movement, stillness, all of these are different components that can help practitioners start to work through hyperarousal, hypoarousal, and start to come back to that window of tolerance. So Julie, if you'll move on to the next slide. This is the other illustration that you can take a look at when we send the PowerPoint off to you, but it's a really cute and easily accessible, easily understood image by Lindsay Brahman. Next slide, Julie, please. Okay. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I come from a restorative yoga background. That's something I'm really passionate about, and something that I teach weekly, often. And so I'm really interested in this idea of stillness. We all move and live at such a rushed, hurried pace. And I'm noticing it in my own voice and my own nervousness, and seeing the clock next to me. Oh, I feel like I got to get all this information out to you quickly. But we as a society are so plugged in, so rushed, and have all of these expectations for ourselves, have societal expectations and pressures that make us feel as though we need to rush. And so I think there's real benefit in stillness, that we could become quiet enough to really listen to our own bodies, that we could hear our bodies maybe for the first time. And there's also benefit in movement. And what I think is really important for therapists, social workers, counselors to understand is that not every yoga class is created equal. Not every yoga class is going to provide the same offerings, the same amount of support. So I want to start by breaking down some of the unique benefits to stillness and movement. Not to contrast them in a way that means good or bad, but just to give you an idea of what either one can offer. And then I'll move into how they can work together. So in a stillness-based class, this would be something like a gentle class, a yin class, a restorative class. There is less movement. So this can offer physical recovery. You know, when we are depressed and feeling frozen and not using our bodies very often, giving ourselves a good amount of rest, a safe and healthy amount of rest, is so important. I've had students just come to my class and sleep, and I know that that's the best thing for them. That's the most restorative, healthy, medicinal thing that they could be doing in that moment, is just to sleep and to honor that and to feel safe enough to do so. So a stillness-based practice might offer some physical recovery from injury, overuse, underuse, abuse. And when we are in stillness, this helps to build awareness around where we're holding tension. When we stop moving and we come to a still point, that can be a place where we really realize, whoa, I tend to really jut my chin far forward, and I know that puts a lot of pressure on my neck. Or, gosh, I'm just sitting here, I'm not doing any effort, but my jaw is so tight, or my shoulders are so high. If we can be still enough to start noticing those things, then we can realize some of the holding patterns, some of the armor that our bodies wear every day. So we can start to build some curiosity about why we hold tension in those places as well. Stillness-based practices are ones that practice remembering what relaxation feels like. If we are constantly feeling that high threat response, we may feel like, well, I don't even know how to relax anymore. I don't even know how to breathe anymore. So entering a stillness-based practice is one that can help us find our way back to that place. And also to empower students to do that for themselves, to offer them some self-reliance in that slow pace. The aim of a stillness-based practice is to move more into that rest, digest, parasympathetic nervous system response, which can be aided by a lot of prop support. So in a restorative class like mine, prop support has diminished significantly because we've moved online, but it is also a place where we can start getting creative about the amount of support that is around us. You know, I have a wall by my bed, I could do legs up the wall. I have blankets, I have pillows, I have stuffed animals, I have books that I could use instead of blocks. I have all of these things that could serve me and support me and prop me up in a way that allows my body to relax against that support. Instead of feeling like I have to hold my body in, longer postures like in a yin or a restorative class, I instead feel held there. There is some quiet, contemplative, meditative time for students to do what they wish with. And a stillness-based practice, because it's focused so much on comfort, we're then coming into a sense of strength and flexibility for the mind instead of for the body. I'm not testing the strength or flexibility of my physical body. Instead, I'm testing or working with the strength and flexibility of my mind. A movement-based class would be something like a Hatha yoga class, basics, open flow. These are some of the names that we give to the classes on the Joy of Yoga platform. We really like to avoid names or levels like beginner, intermediate, advanced, anything like that. But instead, helping people maybe predict how much movement or how much stillness will be within the class. That varies a lot by studio. So if you are referring a client of yours to a yoga class or to a yoga studio, it might be a good idea to just reach out to the studio or some of the teachers and ask, you know, what's the ratio of stillness and movement in this class? Would a client of mine feel safe in a class like this because there's so much movement that they can, you know, get into a consistent flow, and that can be meditative for them? Or would my client feel more safe in a stillness-based practice where they can make their own choices, have less input, have a slower pace? So as I said, benefits to each. A movement-based class will allow a little bit more for stretch, strength building, a release of physical and emotional tension, and that movement can release endorphins and improve the mood. Because we are focusing more on the strength and flexibility of the physical body, it does feel more like an external practice, and the focus is really on safe physical alignment. So these are some of the benefits, the unique benefits to each. And Julie, I'll have you move to the next slide so I can talk about how they work together.
Yeah, I just want to put one point in there really quickly, as I just got a question about it. I just want to make sure, because I teach vinyasa and yin blend. I just want to say that not all yin is trauma sensitive whatsoever. So there's just a particular adaptation that I have happened to adapt that blends trauma sensitive mindfulness and yin. So I just want to make sure I am clear on that, because that's a new thing that I've brought into the forefront. And so by design my classes are, but not all yin is. So I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, same with restorative, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, so moving to the next slide, when stillness and movement are working together, you'll know that in a typical yoga class, I don't want to speak for everyone, but in a typical yoga class, you'll find this bell curve. A little bit of stillness and centering and grounding at the beginning, just to come into the space and feel really present. Building up to movement, cooling down, and then shavasana, having some extended stillness and relaxation. And that ratio, that bell curve, is going to be shaped differently. In a restorative class, you know, it's going to be like whoop, woo, you know, a little bit of movement, little bit of grounding, and then rest. In a hatha yoga class, we would have a lot more movement and then just a little bit of stillness on either end of the class. So it's important to know that every class is going to offer some stillness, centering, shavasana, but the length is going to depend on the teacher and their style. When we're working with stillness and movement, we have the opportunity to explore the breath and the placement of the body as anchors for mindfulness. And we're starting to build awareness around how often the mind enters distraction, whether we're moving or still. It's a practice in returning back to the present experience. So Claire Hudson is a London-based yoga teacher, and she gives this quote about, you know, some people find meditative stillness by moving their bodies, others by resting. So personal preference, trauma history, teacher style and approach, all of these are going to come together and coalesce into, you know, is this practice right for my client or myself? But when teachers employ an empowered choice-making approach, like Julie, Jessie, and I do in our classes, students can find the pace that serves them best in the moment. You know, I might be cueing shavasana, I might be offering the suggestion of rest, but I might have a student in my class who is quietly moving, doing their best not to disturb anyone else who is taking rest. But they know that they have the option to move if that feels more safe. Regardless of what style of class they've chosen to attend, if they come to a class whose teacher is using this empowered choice-making approach, students are invited to just stay present to the sensations that arise, to witness rather than analyze. You know, Julie was talking about curiosity. We use that word so often. Students are really encouraged to start trusting themselves and the experience, the process, not the image, not the performance, not what it looks like, but what it feels like. Not what I look like in comparison to someone else, which is actually easier to avoid online, but just focusing on the personal experience in order to start reclaiming the body as a safe place to be. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jessie, who will be talking more about empowered choice making. Okay.
Yeah, so embodied yoga or trauma-sensitive yoga acknowledges that relational trauma is rooted in the denial of choice. So yoga becomes a practice of making choices as a way to reclaim personal agency over the body. And facilitators, oh, Julie, could you go back one?
Did I go back?
Yeah, perfect. And instructors facilitate this in a in a few different ways. Yeah, that's perfect. Right where it is.
Okay.
Yeah, right there. Okay.
Okay, cool.
The first is invitational language. So that'll often mean that at the beginning of the class, the instructor will give a little speech that just reminds everyone in the room that, you know, this is their time and space, and everything that the instructor offers is a suggestion and only that. They ultimately decide, you know, when and if they decide to move their bodies. And another way that invitational language can show up in these spaces is actually on a more subtle sentence structure level. So in a traditional class, a teacher might say, lift your right arm. But with invitational language, you would say, you might lift your right arm, or you're welcome to lift your right arm if you want to. And the way I see it is it's just like a cue for reconnecting with breath awareness. Now, this is just a subtle reminder that the student has a choice. And another way that instructors facilitate this is by offering multiple variations of yoga shapes. So the main idea here is that, especially if someone is new to a practice, you give them one option, and if it doesn't feel quite right for their body, they might not have a sense of where else they might be able to take their body. So offering multiple shapes is a way to give them a range to explore and start to understand what feels supportive in that moment. And supporting that idea, instructors will give a lot of somatic cues, cues that cultivate awareness of sensation in the body or interoception. And this is a really powerful form of self-knowledge, understanding what's going on in the body. And Bessel van der Kolk, a trauma researcher and author of The Body Keeps the Score, just writes this so well. He says, our sense of ourselves is anchored in a vital connection with our bodies. We do not truly know ourselves unless we can feel and interpret our physical sensations. So in the context of this class, people are invited to sense into the body and then make decisions that are supportive to their well-being. And it can become this virtuous cycle of empowered choice making. And another researcher, Jennifer West, kind of outlines the progression of that process really beautifully. She says, first, I understand that I have a body. Next, I befriend the body. And finally, I find resources within the body. So I know that if I'm starting to leave my window of tolerance, that I can bring awareness to my breath, and maybe that starts to bring me a sense of calm, or I feel myself getting pulled off into a memory. I can touch something near me. I can feel the soles of my feet on the ground and reconnect to the present. So with some of these ideas of this cueing style in mind, I thought that I would offer a quick chair practice. And I just want to be mindful of the time because we're approaching 4 o'clock. So if anyone has somewhere to be or you just need a break, I really want to welcome you. You are welcome to stay. You're welcome to go. We'll be here later. You will get a link of the class. But if you would like to stay, I'm going to scoot back so you can see a little more of me. And you're welcome to start to come to the edge of your chair. Or maybe it would feel more supportive to go find some support with the back of your chair, just kind of sensing where you're at. It might also feel good to stand. We've been sitting for the last hour. All of these movements you can do standing as well. And from here, you might just start to sense into the soles of the feet. Maybe noticing where your hands are, if they're resting alongside the body or on the legs. Maybe just take in a little information in the room around you. The colors, the sense of light, sounds. You might start to notice the rise and the fall of the breath. Or feel the weight of the body against the chair. John Kabat-Zinn, the creator of mindfulness-based stress reduction, says, mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And as we start to cultivate that awareness of the room around us and maybe some of the sensations in our body as well, I want to invite, let's maybe taking a step beyond non-judgment into kind awareness. And if it would help you access that sense of self-kindness, you might start to bring the hands up to the heart. And just feel them rise and fall with the breath. Just acknowledging that however you show up today is welcome. As we start to get into some movement, I just want to remind you that everything I offer today is a suggestion and only that. I really invite you to listen to your body, to follow your own curiosity. And if that curiosity starts to lead you to drop the head down toward the chest, you're welcome to just feel the weight of the head. If the hands are still on the heart, it might make sense to let them rest on the legs again. Just noticing how the rest of the spine responds to the head tipping forward. And then with your next inhale, you might start to lift the gaze. Just starting to explore this range of motion with the head. Maybe exhaling as you drop the head down and inhaling as you lift the head up. You could even bring the hands behind the head if that feels supportive to your neck. And if you don't want to move with the breath, you could also just stay in one of those shapes. Just noticing what you notice. You can keep moving the head, or you can start to add the spine as well, rounding forward into a seated cat. And then with your inhale, lifting the chest, lifting the gaze, opening the heart, the chest for a seated cow. Just moving back and forth between those two. Noticing how it feels to move the spine, to move the neck. Maybe still sensing that weight in the head and how the back, the shoulders respond to that. And if you're ready, start to let the head come back to center. And then you're welcome to tip the head over to your left shoulder. I'll mirror you. With an inhale, come back to center. Maybe flowing with your breath side to side, or resting on one side if you'd like to open up that side of the neck a little bit more. Sensing into the jaw, the shoulders. You can stay here with the head, or maybe you start to reach the arm up too and sway the spine over to the side. And then take it on the other side. We're moving the spine in different directions. And if you want to keep the arm down, you can also try reaching through the fingers as you reach the head away. You could even circle the arm and the shoulder. There's a lot of different ways that you can explore the sides of the neck, the head, the shoulders. It's kind of asking yourself what feels supportive for you in this moment. And if you're ready, you can come back to center. And just moving the ribs, start to twist over to your left. You can start with moving through the ribs, and if you want to add the hands, you can move a little bit deeper into the twist by taking that left hand behind the spine. And then come back to center. We'll shift over to the other side, maybe moving first with the ribs, noticing how far they go on their own, and then if you want, letting the arms assist them to deepen the twist. You can take that maybe one more time on each side. Maybe coming back to the breath, noticing how it feels to breathe in the twist. With an inhale, coming back to center, and then shifting over to the other side. Sensing into the back body, moving with the breath. And then coming back to the center. If you'd like, you can reach the arms out to the sides and up, sweeping them above the head, and then drawing them down the midline. Maybe taking a couple arm sweeps, sensing into the shoulders. Maybe noticing how that movement travels all the way from the shoulder girdle into the fingertips. And the next time that the hands come down, you can let them rest, maybe on the legs, maybe on the heart, or just at the sides of the body. Just taking a couple more moments to rest with the breath. Sensing the inhale and the exhale. Subtle movement of the body. Maybe closing with offering yourself a wish for loving kindness. May I be safe. May I be peaceful. May I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am. Thank you for sharing your practice today.
Okay, so we're down. This is, I think, okay. Now we will just go over what's next steps. If you wanted to go to the next steps with us at Joy of Yoga Online. So we each teach, this is our schedule, current schedule. So I teach a blend of I guess, a stillness-based and movement-based classes. So I teach exploring meditation sorry, that's not you. Sorry, I'm sorry. That's Jessie. I teach movement and breath for balance and ease on Fridays. And then I teach Vinyan. So I teach from 4 to 5, and then I teach a Vinyan class on Saturdays. That's weekly. And then I'm teaching and finishing up this series, this Vinyasa Vinyan series on Wednesday nights through May 13th. But those are my 2 classes. And then at 8:30 through the end of May, I'm also teaching a How to Breathe series, which teaches trauma-sensitive breath work. So it teaches breath awareness, and it's that step before pranayama. So it's that breath awareness of learning being curious about our own breath before we go into harnessing the breath. So they're kind of some techniques that I've adapted through the work of, inspired by the work of Bo Forbes and Ashley Neese. So that is my class venture right now, but most of my stuff is in the yin, from like a trauma sensitive yin, and then the empowered choice making with movement. So whatever, whoever else.
I'm a weekend girl. I bookend the week, so Friday nights and Sunday nights. I teach a restorative yoga class. Friday nights are 75 minutes. Sunday is an hour. And Sunday's class includes distant Reiki healing. So if that's part of your practice, if that's something that you're using to support your healing or would like more information about, please know that I'm open to speak with you about it. So yeah, Fridays and Sundays so far, and then occasional other blips of offerings that aren't at the studio. So stay tuned.
Yes, and I offer exploring meditation for calm and ease, and it is a 30-minute class that does end in 10 minutes of silence, so I will add that caveat. But yeah, basically we explore different meditation techniques, and then I also offer meditation in motion. And that one is very much based in offering somatic cues and breath awareness. So it's a lot of the cueing is based in insight meditation, but we move with it. So yeah, that's what I offer.
And then here's are just some upcoming offerings. So next Saturday, we're going to be doing a virtual yoga relay where we're each going to be offering the various kinds of classes that we teach here. So the styles, so you will be able to get an actual, I guess, taste of each of all the offerings. So you would get movement with Jessie, then we'd move more into the stillness, contemplative aspects of a trauma-sensitive yin practice, and then we move into restorative with Alicia, and that's next week from 2 to 4 online, of course. And yeah, but it's called Reclaiming the Body Through Movement and Rest. And then I have a series of, and then if you have more questions about this, you can always come to the conversations about trauma-sensitive practices on May 21st. And that's just like an open space for people to come talk about any offerings, anything regarding trauma-sensitive practices. It doesn't have to be about yoga necessarily, but that's just an open forum to come ask questions with me. And then I also have an upcoming trauma-sensitive approach to Buddhist meditation coming up, where we get to talk about the window of tolerance as it as it pertains to meditation and the Buddhist philosophy. So that's me.
And I'll be offering a loving kindness moving meditation, and we'll be doing some gentle movement, but also repeating the loving kindness or the metta meditation, which is essentially just, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live with ease. And then offering that to a person you love, and a person that you don't know their story, and a person you struggle with, and then it comes back to yourself, and then it goes out to the whole world. And yeah, so I'll be offering that on May 16th.
Cool. What else do we have? And here's just some resources. You can look at that, all this stuff on, it's just contact. You can always contact us, but this is where you can get a hold of us, any extra stuff on that. So, whoo, I can't see everybody again. Okay. Anyway, great. So that's awesome. So I just wanted to, yeah, I guess if there's any more questions, we can, I guess, stick around for a hair longer. But yeah, let us know if you have any more questions about anything you said. You guys had great questions in the chat box. I was going through those. So awesome. Thank you all
Yeah,
so
thanks
much. Yeah, we'll be around. I can unmute you all if you all want to chat. You're all unmuted.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Did I unmute Keith? There we go. Keith, are you unmuted? Okay. Anyway. Oh, here's 3. Did I get everybody? Were there any questions? Thanks so much for this. I need to head out. I really enjoyed it. Cool. Awesome. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Talk to you soon. It was great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks
Bye.
so much. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks so much. All right. Were there any questions in there that I forgot while I was talking that were not?
No, we got them all.
Cool.
Mm-mm.
What were, one second. I'm going to